don't mean anything, but thanks for listening. Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to We Say Things, episode 49. Suns fan here with the great Cinderin, the one, the only. How are you?
I'm good, Shannon. How are you?
I'm great. We're actually recording this earlier than usual, as you can tell by my backdrop being very light and bright, unlike my usual setting. And it's because we are casting stuff that we'll talk about in a minute that requires me
That's
to be
why
up.
my background is dark.
Well, your background looks exactly the same as always.
It's a bit darker.
Slightly. But it requires me to be up at 6 a.m. I don't know how long this is going to be a thing. We'll see. We'll let you know. But it's only going to affect the Twitch live stream. Otherwise, we'll be posted at the same time anyway.
Yeah.
So we have some Patreon shoutouts, Cinderin.
Oh, we do. Oh, but we do.
I'll do the first half, or you can do, it doesn't matter, whichever one you want to do.
You go ahead.
Keep in mind, guys, for those that we're going to shout out, I get some messages occasionally like, oh, can you call me this instead of this? You can change your name in Patreon so that I don't have to think about this every single week. But I do have notes for a couple people. So first and foremost is _man, my boy, my top donator on my stream as well. I don't know who he is, but he's definitely a Saudi prince. Also, Ben Broomhead, Ben Jackson, Blaze, is that the Blaze? I don't know. Chosnek Pizda, DG, Dopper, aka Dop, my boy as well. Deepuria, sounds Iranian. Dyslexic Lawyer, Fane, GG Gamer 74, Anonymous. You can take over from here, Cinderin.
Oh, so then we got to the hard name, so then I can take it. Okay. Milos Gavrilovic, Nivnav, Novi Panda, Perch Black, Runny Keel, Terry Tip, The Coward, Fellowship of the Ping, Vincent Moore, Wooden Aftertaste, and Zero Dota. Thank you guys so much for the big support. You are the brunt of the support for this podcast, so really appreciate you guys funding this. If you're a listener or a viewer and you're interested in checking this out, there is a link on the screen. If you're listening to it, you will have to go to patreon.com/we-say-things if you want to chip in and support the podcast. So thanks to everybody that's done it. We're looking into and thinking about how we can incentivize more in the future to give more back to you guys. But for now, this is what it is.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, we're super happy with all the support we've got. So good shit.
Yep, good shit indeed. Remember last week when I said it was our 1 year anniversary? I lied.
Yeah.
It is now our 1 year anniversary, Cinderin. April 22nd to be exact. I don't know how I thought it was last week. That's incredible. So that means we have only missed 3 weeks, 2 of which I think were TI, and the one where I lost my voice and you refused to do it, which was technically your fault, not mine. I wanted to do it.
People would have hated it.
Yes.
I like this as a running gag that it's our 1 year anniversary every week. So the next week it's also our 1 year anniversary.
Technically, it won't be. I mean, yeah, it's technically true next week as well. So why not? We can keep it up. Another thing I want to talk about before we officially get started is, have you heard of The Last Dance, Cinderin?
No.
So there's this new documentary that people are going crazy for in the U.S. since there's no basketball right now, about Michael Jordan and the 97-98 Bulls. Apparently, they had a documentary crew follow them around the entire year, basically unprecedented access. And I read about this a bit online. It was complete, like the only reason they were okay doing this, Michael Jordan and the rest of the team, is Michael Jordan got the say whether they ever got to use the footage, which apparently was always a no until recently. This is over 20 years of hidden footage that no one's ever seen. And they made it into a 10-part documentary series, and they're showing 2 every week for the next 5 weeks. And I watched the first 2 episodes last night, and it's pretty fucking good, I'm not going to lie. Maybe a little sad seeing some highlights of the Suns losing, but aside from that, it is really cool. You guys should check it out.
Wow.
Are you a big Michael Jordan
basketball
fan? Yes.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch that, Shannon. Thank you.
Okay, just add it to your endless list of things. But we were casting today, which we'll talk about in a second. And apparently, Cinderin, the last movie you have seen is what in the theaters?
The last movie I've seen in the theater, I think, is Detective Pikachu. I think so.
Yes. Do you find anything wrong with that?
No? Why? Because it's been too long?
Yes.
We don't go to the movies that often. We watch stuff at home on Netflix. We just don't go to the cinema that often.
Are you sure you watch stuff in Netflix?
Yeah,
there's a couple movies that you can literally watch on Netflix now that
we watch things. Yeah, but
might unburden
because now I'm doing the podcast.
You know, this creates a lot of stress in our relationship that you haven't seen certain things before, like me naked and in Bruges.
Yes.
Choose which one you want.
That's
so anyway, back to the point. We're casting the WePlay tournament. Is it actually called Pushka? What does Pushka mean?
Pushka.
What is that?
Don't know. I think ka is an ending you can put on words in Russian that makes it. Does it make it small? Like if you say pushka, then it's a little push. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if it's a suffix that means that or something else. It's a suffix in Russian. You put
doesn't clear anything up for me. But anyway, we're casting that tournament. We're doing a couple of the days for the qualifiers, and we haven't been scheduled officially yet. But we'll be doing some of the main bracket as well. So it will be fun. So check that out. You want to talk about the ESL EU/CIS conclusion by any chance?
So we did quite a lead into this or talk about this last week with the other regions, and then Europe was exciting and up for grabs. And obviously now Europe is concluded. Unfortunately, I have messed up a little bit here, so I need to find it again.
Yeah, let's just do this live. It's fine. Don't be prepared.
Don't worry about it.
This will be a really short episode, other than sitting and Googling every single topic.
No, it's okay, Shannon. I've got it. I just didn't have it ready. So, so last time we talked about the big surprises in terms of how well they were doing was Viking GG and Chicken Fighters. And when it came down to the playoff bracket, we obviously have found our top three. And the biggest surprise to everybody is Viking.gg got third. They made the podium. Fourth place was Chicken Fighters. These two teams finished ahead of teams like Nigma, Secret, and Alliance. Secret got 5th, 6th, and Nigma and Alliance got 7th, 8th. So Viking GG and Chicken Fighters had an awesome tournament. And then the grand finals was a very close best of 5 between VP and OG, where OG barely lost. So VP clinched the victory 3-2 in that finals, which was full of some one-sided games, and I believe game 5 was really close. So I didn't watch the whole best of 5 series, but overall the parts that I watched of these games were pretty one-sided and dominant, which is kind of a sign of the patch. Like the games are relatively fast. If a team gets off to a good lead, they generally ride it home. But there were some turnarounds as well. So overall,
Chicken Fighters, like you said, got 4th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I was expecting them to do quite well in our today's cast that we did, where they faced against OG Seed, and OG Seed pooped on them pretty hard.
Yeah, they got destroyed today.
Not sure if it was just not their day or if OG Seed is that much better. We'll see.
That's hard to say. We'll find out soon enough during this, I'm sure.
Indeed.
But it's a very volatile time, so you can do very well one week, and then the next week things can swing around because meta is changing nonstop and teams are figuring things out. The ones that were a little bit behind the 8 ball on how to play aggressive and how to play fast, you give them 5 days to catch up, and all of a sudden the balance can shift really fast.
Mm-hmm.
If we play this tournament again, Secret is probably not getting 6th, right? I don't think so, at least. But, that's how competition is. Sometimes things swing
Sometimes
around.
You lose.
Yes.
That's a very famous quote, I'm sure. Anyway, so there's a new patch, Cinderin, which in its name, it's 7.26, which sounds like a big deal, okay? Usually there's this huge patch with these new numbers that you start off with the whole numbers without the A's, the B's, the C's. I open this and I see literally 4 lines of text, which means we can analyze this line by line, and it will only take 5 minutes. So let's do that. So
let's do it.
The first line says, this release is focused only on the following systematic changes. Once these changes settle a bit, there will be a follow-up hero and item-specific adjustments. So technically, that's not even a line of the patch notes.
So the analysis of this for me is that it says that we have this now, and there will be other stuff coming later. And the other stuff that comes later will be about heroes and items.
Correct. See, I read that and I thought the same thing as well. So I'm glad we're on the same
Nice.
wavelength. So
Good shit.
the second line says attributes no longer provide magic resistance, spell amp, and move speed via strength, int, and agility, respectively. So I have mixed feelings about this, Cinderin.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I wasn't a huge fan when they changed this. So if we can back up a bit.
Right.
As of like 3-4 years ago, I want to say, is when I started to notice patch notes change to, I would say it's not all encompassing, of course, but generally try to be more casual in nature, like easier to understand. They're trying to simplify a lot of the mechanics. And then when they added this a couple years ago, where each attribute, in addition to the stuff that it already gives, the HP, the int, and the armor, and attack speed, I guess, it gave all these extra things. So I was like, that feels like it's overcomplicated. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just getting rid of it again, which is also weird because it becomes even harder to keep up with this shit, man. Like, am I crazy?
Right.
Like, you can't make these huge changes and then just revert them 2 years later. It's weird. Shrines are gone now.
I honestly think this probably never should have been in the game.
Well, yeah,
that's my opinion. I don't think this added complexity to the attributes was good or necessary. And I think the judgment now is that it isn't. The problem is they've done tons of balancing over the last 2 years to, complement these changes. And now that all of this is reverted, then a lot of heroes are suffering. So, for example, since agility doesn't give movement speed anymore, agility carries are slow. They all lost movement speed to, complement the fact that they got move speed from agility. So it balanced out in the end. And that means agility carries in mid game and late game are way slower than they used to be, which in some cases is fine. Like, many would argue agility carries were too fast, and I agree. The problem is they're too slow in the beginning of the game now. So early levels to mid game, agility carries, most of them need a flat move speed buff now. That is obviously coming, but they don't have yet. So the current patch, some heroes got butchered and others didn't, and it's kind of, seemingly at random because there's no adjustments made for the individual hero yet. Second biggest losers are strength heroes, in my opinion. Magic resistance was a big part of what made strength heroes good. They all lost that now. So the tanky strength heroes are way less tanky, like Centaur, Underlord, Beastmaster, these kind of heroes. And then the intelligence part, losing the spell amp, I think is the least significant one. It matters a lot on a few heroes, like Leshrac and Zeus, but on a lot of others, it's not that big of a deal. Like the support int heroes,
So
it's not so big.
I agree. And it's funny you say that, though, because do you remember back when this change was originally implemented a couple years ago? I feel like most people were focusing on the spell amp being of the three, the most important or the craziest or the thing they wanted to talk about the most. And it just felt like you couldn't even tell the difference half the time, Of course, that's not entirely true. There's some, like Zeus, for example, I think it's pretty noticeable, considering like just Arc Lightning a creep, for example. You can tell late game. But yeah, reverting this back now, you talked about the move speed changes. I'm sure there's been a lot of heroes that have had their strength gain nerfed because of this, right? And so now are underpowered as a result. So I think this next patch, I'm sure they're going to be doing more than this, but I bet you most of the changes are going to be literal just attributes starting and
I think so too. I think it's necessary.
From a casual standpoint, is boring, but it's going to be needed after these changes. So,
Yep, I agree.
So the next thing, gold bounties reduced by 10%. This affects buildings, lane creeps, neutrals, and heroes. And the kill streak gold has been reduced by 50%, which I'm sure you've been very happy to learn. Is this noticeable in game?
I would say, 10% is, you notice it for sure. Like, item timings seem off. People get their items later. And once again, some heroes suffer a lot more from this. The problem is that I think the intention of this, we were getting really snowbally and fast games overall. Games were quick. So the logic here was that, well, if we reduce the gold bounty for everyone, the games are going to be slower because heroes get powerful items later, which is true. But it also means that the heroes that get them earliest get them that much more relatively early than the others do. If you have an item timing at minute 12 and another carry has one at minute 20, you will obviously get yours. You will have your lead for a longer time relatively, right? That means that the snowbally and cost-efficient carries are now even better, and the slow carries are even worse. And I don't think that was the intention of this. So I think they might actually change this in 726A, where they find ways of adjusting this rather than just a flat 10% decrease. Especially because this last point where the kill streak gold is reduced by 50% now also means that if you are playing against these high tempo carries, if they get ahead and you win a fight against them, your bounty is not that big. We actually had a game we cast today, right? The OG seed had like a 12k gold lead, and then they screwed up big time and got team wiped, and they lost like 2 to 3k gold. Yeah. So pulling a comeback is really difficult, and therefore you need to be able to fight a lot of the time. It's not impossible, of course. There are some strategies. OG recently did a ridiculous base defense in one of the games in ESL 1, which was fantastic. They had the most absurd win against Secret.
Was that on this patch? How long ago was
that? I think it was on 7/26. It could have been the day before. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, they had a ridiculous base defense in that game. If you haven't watched it, you should check it out. It's it was a pretty crazy ending. Yeah, that's the patch for now. I'm sure 7/26A will come out in a few days probably, because the game needs healing right now.
Yeah, I would expect the patch to be extremely long in terms of the line versus the 7.26, which was quite disappointing, I have to say. But I would say more heroes than not will be touched in terms of the attributes, if not all, honestly. I think this just changes so much. Next thing on the list is PPD has retired from Dota 2, Cinder. This is his second retirement, I believe. The first one, I believe he retired and then became the CEO of EG.
I don't remember if his wording back then was retiring.
True. Maybe it was a break.
I'm not sure. I think he was on break or taking a step back or exploring other options at the time. I think that was the wording back then. But knowing PPD and the way this is worded and everything, I think this is going to last, actually. I know a lot of people pull retirements in Dota and come back. But I think PPD, the way he has written it, so let me find his tweet, which I think, so both he and NIP made a statement, but I think PPD's personal one has a bit more depth because it's talking a little bit more about his personal reasons rather than, the blanket statement from the org. So I'll just read it out loud here. So the title of his post is Moving On, Retiring from Competitive Dota 2. Hey everyone, I wanted to write a few things publicly about my decision to step away from competitive Dota 2. I've spent just about the entirety of my 20s competing in video game competitions, and at this point in my life, almost 29, I'm looking for something else that I do not think I can find in my current position. Today, I find myself focused on personal growth rather than competition versus others, and because of that, I feel like I have lost the grit and ambition necessary for myself to be the competitor I'm comfortable being. I don't feel bad about it, as I believe change is healthy, and I'm eager to do something amazing and new in my 30s. I'll be forever grateful to the people who believed in my abilities and saw the potential that I always believed I had, no matter how objectively poor things may have looked in any particular moment. I want to thank all the fans and players of Dota 2, whether you like me or not, for the amazing world you created and allowed me to exist in. So, clearly, it sounds like this is a true retirement. Most of the time when people pull these retirements in quotation marks in Dota, it's like, I'm quitting the game. Thanks for all your support, right? But it sounds like this is like, there's way more depth to this than the usual retirement post. Like, it's really thought through. He has other goals he wants to pursue. He has tried being a CEO of EG for a year. Maybe he has a bit of a taste for the business side of things. Maybe he's looking to have children. Who knows? Like, it could be anything. He's talking about personal. I mean, he's talking about personal growth. It could be. I'm just saying, like, it could be anything. True. Right.
Okay.
So whatever personal growth means to him, for some people, personal growth is a big part of that is having a family. I've not heard anything, so don't start any rumors based on this. It's pure speculation, like that kind of thing where you start doing something else, right? Like being a top competitor in Dota 2 and having a child can be difficult. I think there's a few that are juggling it. I do believe in Dota right now, but it's got to be tough. Like Ice has a kid. I think it's mainly SEA players, actually, that have kids. But anyway, beside the point, whatever he wants to do, if it's work or personal life,
I wish him best of luck. Casting for sure. He's been an amazing caster in the past. If you remember...
It's also possible he will do nothing in Dota. And I think people need to accept and be willing to... just be willing to accept the fact that he might just not want to do Dota anymore. Just like Jerax, right? Who supposedly is gone. We don't know if that's staying, right? Like, you never know. Maybe he gets the hunger back, but it sounds like these people are looking for something else in their lives, and that's very normal.
It is
If
normal.
anything, it's actually very unusual how extremely glued our pro scene is to the game. Like, the relative number of people that quit is really low, I think. Like, people are very committed in this game.
I mean, I wouldn't
compared to
say
how
it's
difficult it
just...
is and how big of a toll it takes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because it's not exactly like other games where, like, if you're a Fortnite player, it's not like you can't switch to Apex or now Valorant. Like, you might not be as good, but you have an avenue. But in Dota, it just feels like, I mean, maybe it's just the MOBA genre as a whole. Like, you don't see many League players come into Dota either, right?
No.
But if you compare it to like traditional sports, it makes more sense why it's easier to transition, because you have this set amount of time that you're going to be good. Because once you get to a certain stage, like in basketball, you get to your mid to late 30s, your father time is catching up with you. You actually are not good at your job anymore. So that's when you have to start truly thinking about whether transitioning into broadcasting or whatever else may come. But for esports, in theory, you can be an 80-year-old man and still play Dota professionally.
In theory.
In theory. We don't know if that's possible.
We don't know.
But
some of the best players in the world right now are older than PPD. So it's not an age issue. It is not. But yeah, like, I don't want to make too much of a eulogy out of this, but obviously,
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it we're talking about it really seriously, but I think it's worth mentioning, like, if you do want to talk about the main things PPD did for the game, I think the biggest overall thing that he did was put NA on the map in a time when NA sucked in Dota.
Yep.
He played a big role in making that region competitive, which has been extremely good for the game. So I think that's his biggest contribution. Like, a lot of people will think about, he won TI, that was amazing, and that's a big personal accomplishment for him, obviously. But the biggest thing for the game was that the region actually became competitive after it had been shit for 2 years. Like, barely done anything good. Suddenly this team starts being good, and he obviously has a huge share in that. And that has done a lot for the scene, because it has made NA teams in the future, they haven't won TI, but they've been way more competitive. The scene has been better. There's been more sponsorships, more attention, more leagues as a result of EG's success. So I think NA owes a lot to this guy. And obviously the rest of his team, it wasn't a one-man effort, right? Let's not kid ourselves. But obviously he played a huge role. So yeah, that's the biggest thing about PPD and Dota, I think.
A true legend of our time, no doubt.
Let's see what he does. No idea.
You think NA, like OG people, not the team, of course. Think of Fear. I think of PPD. Those are the two names that come up immediately in my head. Yeah, he's definitely. I mean, he.
Oh yeah, Fear has a kid too. Actually,
he was involved in NA, NACL, NADCL,
NADCL. Yeah.
So definitely been pushing a lot of the in-house leagues and professional Dota within NA. So couldn't agree more. Wish him the best of luck in whatever he decides to do. I'm sure he'll be successful. Speaking of EG, they lost to Cloud9. So last week we were talking about how Cloud9 has been, I think awful is an understatement. They were like 2-19 or something like that in terms of win-losses.
Very bad win-loss.
Very, very bad. And in the BTS Pro Series, they were close to getting the 3-2-2, which everyone was hoping for, Cinderin. But they disappointed everyone by not only beating EG 2-1. Let me find the exact series here.
I have them here.
All right, tell me. What else did they win?
Then they beat Furia 2-0, and then they beat Beast Coast 2-0. Wow. So they're on a hot streak of winning 3 matches in a row after losing pretty much everything they could. So the moment we talked about them, they got good. So good work.
Well done, guys.
Seems like any time you have anything to do with Misery that isn't good, Misery gets good. So you should just, if you want Misery to win, you just talk about him. There you go.
Yeah, just bring him up every now and then.
To be fair, though, what they did do, they made a big inter-team change for now, or intra-team change. Misery is playing position 3. That's the big change that they've made. He's playing core, and they've put Snaking on support. And hard to explain exactly why this makes such a huge difference, but in their team dynamic, it's clearly, at least short term, has produced results. So I'm sure they're going to continue with that for now. And they're probably motivated and happy to start picking up some steam. It's got to feel really good after such a drought to get some wins. So
I feel like Misery played a bit of offlane before on, I want to say it was Secret.
He played it on secret when he won a major. Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I think it's been mostly 5 and 4 throughout his whole career. Yep. So will be interesting to see how that progresses. Everyone's keeping an eye on them, of course. Yep. So another thing occurred this week, Cinderin, that was apparently a big deal. CSGO has now eclipsed Dota in terms of an all-time peak player base on at one time. So let's talk about these. Well, let's talk about the top 5 on this list. So this is from Steam, the top 5 played game, not like over time, but of one day, what the peak
highest one-day
player
peak
base is. So number 5, do you want to go in that order or you want to go from the top?
Top to bottom.
Okay, as in top number 1.
Yeah.
So number 1 of all time is PUBG with 3.2.
Far.
Yeah, 3.2 million. Not even close to anybody else. All on their own. And boy, has that game gone downhill. Holy shit. That's another story entirely. Number 2 is now CSGO with 1.3 million. Dota is now third with 1.295 million. So not that far behind, but probably will never get there again. Let's be real. Fallout 4 is number 4 with 472,000. So $500,000 basically, which is a huge drop off again. And then number 5 is a game I've literally never heard of that currently has 5 people online as we talk about this, is Postal with 412,000. I feel like this is a bug. I
cannot explain this. I feel like we've either missed a phenomenon or there's a bug here. So basically, I'm looking through the history of Postal and how many concurrent players it's had. Its peak in the last 10 years, or in the last 7 years, was 628 people online in January 2018. With one exception, which was December 2019, where it had a peak player base of 412,063. And the month after, it was down to 42. I don't know what happened.
It's a bug. It has to be a bug.
If it was a bug, or if the game was free, or if there was some sort of huge hype around big Twitch streamers playing it, drawing people into this game to play it for 1 month or whatever. This is weird. Like, I can't explain this on this chart.
It doesn't make sense, though, for it to drop back down the next month. It has to be a bug.
I don't understand. Like,
it has to be a bug.
The graph looks absurd. It's like plus infinite % in 1 month. And
so
then
let's just assume it's a bug.
100%.
The real number 5, which is technically 6th on this list, is Grand Theft Auto 5 with 364,000.
Which is way more believable.
Now, when I look at this list, I'm actually more surprised than anything. Not about CS. We can talk about the CS versus Dota thing in a second, but more so that the all-time peak for so many games on Steam is actually a lot lower than I thought it would be. Like, a lot of the really popular games these days are just not on Steam. Like, you talk about Fortnite, you talk about Apex, you talk about, obviously, any Riot-related game is going to be on their client. I'm sure Steam is still doing well because they take a percentage of literally every game, but to see PUBG is like by itself, number 1 is a little concerning, I guess. But what are your thoughts on Dota versus CSGO? The ever struggle to gain Gaben's twinkle of his eye. You know?
I don't know. I'm happy if both games are doing well. I think they're both great games and they deserve success. I don't need them to fight each other. I don't really care very much which one has more players right now. I care about Dota relative to... Not really. I care about Dota relative to itself, not relative to the rest of the games. I care about if we're trying to make our game better for ourselves. And if we're losing players to CSGO, then at least we're losing players to a good game, right? It's more like... What I want to focus on is how can we get Dota's numbers up again? Not to steal them from CSGO. I don't care if we're better than CSGO.
I mean, we're not... I don't disagree. We're not competing with CSGO. They're completely different genres. But to say that you don't care versus another game, you should. I mean, you're saying that you want the game to improve, but what metric do you look at to understand whether that's working? Is to look at other...
Dota relative to its own history, I think. That's the best metric I have. Because the thing about CSGO, you don't know if Dota's players are lost to CSGO. CSGO might just be getting more popular because Call of Duty sucks. Let
me rephrase. Then, I'm not talking about specifically. I'm not talking about specifically comparing to CSGO. I'm just talking about comparing it to literally every game. So your benchmark is other games in general, right? That's how I would look at it. But I understand.
My benchmark is Dota versus Dota. I think it's the best benchmark we have because it's hard to... How to say this in a good way? So... Genres like come and go and games fade in and out of popularity, right? So maybe a lot of players who played Dota are playing something else, and that game is going to suck in 2 months, and a lot of them come back. That means Dota's numbers fluctuate, even if Dota did nothing, right? So there will be variance, and there will be things changing all the time. What we need to focus on is how can we make our game as good as possible for the people that like the game and don't want to quit. The people that want to quit will find a reason to quit, right? Like, if you don't want to play the game, you're not going to. I've had plenty of video games I've played that I thought were super fun, and then suddenly one day I stopped playing for whatever reason, because something else interests me more, right? So Dota shouldn't be like, fuck, CSGO has more players than us, that means it's a better game. Like, that's not the argument. Or whatever game you want to look at. It's about, it's okay if Dota doesn't ever reach its peak again. It's very natural that games do this. If you look over the list of games on the Steam list, all of them are below their peak except CSGO. It's the one game on their top 25 that has its peak right now. Every other game is lower.
But if you look at it, CSGO has been out for a while. I mean, Counter-Strike as a game has been, like, I talked about being in beta 1. That was 1999. The fact that it's hitting its peak now is crazy. That's insane. If you're just talking about it in a vacuum. That is actually
yes and
insane.
No, because I think a big part of the reason CSGO is hitting insane numbers is that Corona is in full effect and people have time that they didn't used to before. And if you have a lot of time and you're like, I want to play a video game, I'm going to play what I played when I was younger. You're going to play the game that you remember. People used to play Counter-Strike.
It probably got, I don't know how much of a boost, but it probably got a boost from Valorant as well, because a lot of people cannot play
entirely
Valorant
possible.
Right now,
yeah,
and that is
absolutely.
the game everyone's suggesting to practice in to be able to be good.
There's like multiple factors right now that are helping CSGO, which is great. I don't really want to isolate that so much. It's more about, like, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, how do we make Dota a better place for the players that want to play it, and how do we get them to have their friends play it because they want to and don't get discouraged? That's the main thing. Like, how do we get back to...
I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum.
Yeah, we've talked about it at length. So we don't need to go into too much detail about it anymore. But yeah, this whole... I'm being genuine when I say this whole game versus game, it really doesn't touch me that CSGO has more all-time peak now than Dota. It's just not important, I think.
See, you understand my perspective. I don't care specifically about Counter-Strike beating us. It's more the idea that Dota is less popular than other games now than it used to be.
In a way, for me, it's absurd to think about the fact that Dota has been bigger than CSGO this whole time. I think that in itself is crazy. Like, how does CSGO not have more players than Dota? It's an easier game. Tons of people played Counter-Strike back in the day compared to Warcraft 3. It was a much bigger game overall than Warcraft was, I think, at least.
I mean, if they ported the later iterations of Source, I mean, I've talked about this before, but I'm a bit of an old schooler, Cinderin, when it comes to Counter-Strike. I think CSGO, compared to the later iterations of Source and 1.6, is objectively just a worse game in so many ways. And the only reason that it's just more accessible now, it's free to play. It has like chests. It has all this, has matchmaking. You didn't have that stuff back then. The only difference is now you have 64 tick servers for some fucking reason. I don't want to get into this shit again.
But this is it's an interesting point though, right? Because what you just talked about was you took CS as a game and then you implemented some things that made it better. Sure, you did some things worse, but you made things better with matchmaking, with all this stuff. That's what I want to focus on for Dota. How do we make Dota better? Because then our numbers can increase, even if it's the same game. It's about making it more fun for people, not about like necessarily competing with others. Just make your own game good.
That's what the first start to that road is, Cinder, is getting rid of the spell amp from int, the move speed from agility, and the magic resist from strength. That is step number 1, my friends, in a very long novel.
I am super hopeful that something big happens this year with Dota. I'm actually really hopeful. And I don't know if I'm naive. I think a lot of people are going to call me an idiot for this and be like, you know what, Valve doesn't care. I genuinely think they're putting in a lot of effort to overhaul Dota a bit right now. And the reason I believe it is that I've seen what they have done with their communication and their changes in both Underlords and Artifact. And I think it's inevitably going to spill over into Dota a little bit. So there's going to be something happening that includes the community more, that they've also promised they're overhauling the new player experience, which has been promised more than 6 months ago. And that, to me, that I don't think they've given up on it and forgotten it. I think they're really trying to make it good. That's my optimist speaking.
You know what I would love? Like, this is, we've talked, again, we're not going to talk about stuff that they can do to improve the game, to help newer player, blah, blah, blah. We've talked about so much. But one cool thing that you brought up, the community interaction. that they could do that I would fucking love, and I think I've emailed them specifically about this, is having a community hero contest where they just get concepts from the community. So heroes like Puck was like, I think that's the most notorious, or the most infamous one. Infamous is the most famous. I don't know. Puck was a community-made hero. I think maybe 2 out of the 4 skills are intact now versus what these. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
I think so. Something.
I would like community has some crazy ideas for heroes. I think they over complicate them sometimes because I've read many of them, but many of them are very cool ideas. And you're only coming out with 2 heroes a year anyway. Like, why not just involve the community in something, or at least make them think like they're including them?
I think a lot of the hero designs that have come out in the last few years are old. Pangolier Pangolier's ulti is so old that it got stolen into League of Legends.
Really?
When League of Legends came out. So there's a hero in League of Legends called Rammus, and he has a regular spell, which is not an ulti, that curls him up into a ball and makes him roll. And that is literally an idea from the Play Dota forums from more than 10 years ago that is now Pangolier.
Okay.
Right.
That doesn't.
So it's a really old idea. There's tons of old ideas from Play Dota that are starting to get ported in. And if you look at what's happening with some things in Dota, right? We're getting some of these neutral items that we've got in, right? Like the Leveler is a discarded item from 10 years ago in Dota 1 that got reimagined and put into the game again. So old ideas, I think when they need to put new stuff into the game, I think they're actually going back. I think they're thinking way back to old suggestions, whether it's from community members or beta testers or IceFrog's own ideas. And he's like, how can I put this in the game? So I don't think we're lacking ideas, but the more community interaction, the better for me. I think it's great. Why not?
If they're already doing that secretly, why not just make a contest out of it? I don't think it's really that difficult. It just makes it more interesting for everybody.
I think it's good. Yeah.
Just to round out this list that we were discussing before, just to give you guys an idea, 22nd on the list, so top 25 is Dota Underlords. I was a little bit surprised by that.
Yep.
With
actually
200,000 people. And then the game that we talked about how PUBG is number 1 by far. Number 10 on the list of all-time peak player base is PUBG Test Server. With 320,000. That is
above Counter-Strike.
It's above 1.6. That is unbelievable. What the hell? People were so excited when that game first came out. Just changed everything,
Yeah.
All right, anyway, moving on. We talked about this before, how Valve might want to market their games at some point, to put it bluntly. And I believe it was Nikki was scrolling her phone on Twitter, and she got a Dota Underlords ad, Cinderin. It's like a little 30-second video.
It is from the Dota Underlords Twitter.
Yes.
The official one. So it is Valve.
So do you
Somebody hacked their Twitter.
Yeah, definitely a mistake. It's not real. So this obviously works a little bit better for games like Underlords that are more mobile-based. Like I could see Artifact, it also working. Would this make any difference for Dota, you think?
To advertise it?
To advertise it on, I mean, this is for specifically mobile, but I guess we can open it up to general advertisement. Like, how much do you think it even helps for stuff like this?
Okay, so I think this is what's going to happen. Okay, bold prediction.
Okay.
Valve are trying this with Underlords to see if they can notice any difference based on advertising a game on platforms. And they're advertising Underlords because it's mobile, it's easy to download and play, it's very beginner friendly, super easy to get into for people. Based on what happens there, when they make their big overhaul to the new player experience, they're going to advertise it as a relaunch of the game that encourages new players to play. And then they're going to advertise that. They're actually going to try that. That's my prediction. They're going to advertise when the new player experience comes out. That's part of the package. Is trying to get more people into the game.
You're saying they're basing it off of analytics of Dota Underlords.
Valve are extremely data driven. Everybody knows that yes. Valve are data driven. So if they run test runs like this, there's good and bad things about it. I'm just saying if they run a test on this and they can see zero difference, let's say they market it aggressively. They're not, right? This is pretty soft, and we don't know how much they've paid and how many people they're reaching with this campaign or whatever. But if they feel like there's a noticeable difference and it actually matters, that's super good, because then they're going to try it on other games. That's my guess here.
All right, I'm going to.
So I think the Dota Underlords team and the Dota team talk. because I think there's an overlap on who works on the games.
Yes, of course.
Whereas we've talked about sometimes CSGO and Dota 2 seem like they work for different companies.
Different companies entirely,
but,
yeah. So I think it's less, this is my opinion, and I don't know if this is actually true. Maybe we're just looking into it too much where we assume that Valve doesn't think advertising works. Maybe it's about, like, the way that I look at it is, of course marketing works.
Yeah.
Other companies are doing it. Obviously it works to some degree. The question is, how do you do it in a way that makes it work for your game specifically? And obviously there's no right answer for that. I don't know. It's tough to say. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think advertising for a game like Dota would be a mistake unless you had a new player experience.
Right. I think that's the point here, is that they're stepping into this area, but they're specifically not doing it for Dota yet. Right. And do we know if they've done it for CSGO? Could that also in part explain this peak? Have they started advertising CSGO anywhere? Do you know? I don't know.
I don't know.
Like, maybe there's been some sort of campaigns running.
I mean, it definitely got a boost when they went free to play. So, that's the first thing. Which introduced a lot of cheaters, of course. That's another story entirely. Okay, so moving from that to CSGO a little bit, it's now copying Valorant, which is hilarious because Valorant was copying CSGO, which we'll get into that in a second as well. But there was a patch recently. This was, I want to say, less than a week after Valorant was not released, but released upon the world in terms of streaming at least. CSGO came out with a new feature where you can see other players' crosshairs when you're spectating them, and then you can use their crosshair, like copy paste their config or whatever it is for their actual crosshair, which is really cool, which is something I really liked in Valorant. Like, you see people, especially in Valorant because you have a lot more settings to work with, they have like the worst crosshairs, like on purpose, like ones that look like they were made in Minecraft or something, like super huge and obnoxious and just pixely. It's always hilarious to see that. But CSGO now copying Valorant, Cinderin. We talked about this the other week where we weren't even sure if they were going to bother, if they even cared about Valorant being successful. So what's your take on this?
If you see something that's good and you think it's a good idea for your game and it's not copyrighted, I don't see a problem with it. Why not? People get inspired by each other all the time. It's like saying in Dota, why are you guys starting to pick Omni Knight when our team picked Omni Knight? It's like, well, it's fucking works, so why wouldn't we pick Omni Knight and win? Like, you know, it's not like Riot owns the rights to having people have crosshairs. I'm pretty sure Valve has had that for a while. So just getting inspired and getting ideas is a part of every business and every part of life, you know? It's like, I don't know why this is a big deal that they're inspired by another game. It's this whole pride with our game is better than theirs, or fuck Riot or whatever. You know, just own up to it. If they're doing something smart, be happy it gets put in your game. Like, I can't.
You know, something else they could add to the game and copy Valorant on? It's 128 tick servers. That would make a big difference. Please.
That's a great fucking idea. Put it in the new player experience for CSGO.
What a unique idea. We've never seen that before. My goodness. Well, this is a good segue into the whole Riot talk. So, of course, we talked a little bit about Valorant and whatnot, but Riot has been known to not have unique ideas for the most part. Their games are based off of other games. There's no other way to really explain it. You have League of Legends, which is a copy of Dota. You have Teamfight Tactics, which is a copy of Auto Chess. And now you have Valorant, which is a copy of Counter-Strike and Overwatch. And it's not even just like a little bit. It's super, super blatant. And I'm not saying this is a negative. This is kind of what the conversation is going to be. But for Valorant alone, like we talked about this again, but a lot of it is 1.6 inspired, not just inspired, but it's like direct ports in a lot of cases. There's a couple maps that are almost exactly the same as CS maps, which nobody's really talking about. For those that have been playing, there's a map called Split, which I really hate. That's my least favorite map. And if you look at the layout, it is almost exactly like Inferno. It's crazy how exactly the same it is. And it's even more imbalanced than Inferno. But where was I going with this? Oh, so and then they have Overwatch stuff, which we talked about, and it's not like it's inspired. There are some things that are exactly the same. The voice lines are almost as cheesy and exact. It sounds like I'm playing the same heroes in Overwatch. They have the same abilities in a lot of the cases. The wall, the res, whatever the case may be, a lot of them are exactly the same. So Riot has made a living off of copying other people's stuff But is this a problem? Like, they get a bad rap from people like us a lot of the times, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But does it matter at all? They're taking other people's ideas, but they're making them their own in a way. That their games are popular, they're successful.
It matters if it's against copyright laws. If not, it's called being inspired, right? It's
Inspired.
to me. To me, it's that simple. If CS, for example, if Valve have a problem with it and they want to sue Riot for stealing their maps, they can do that, right? Like, or stealing their property. But if it's within, I don't know what concept this is called, but there's plenty of ways you can be inspired by others, and you could take Inferno and tweak some things and be like, oh, this is totally not Inferno. But then, like, where do you draw the line? When is it not Inferno anymore? And when is it Inferno? Is it if you change all the textures but the map layout is the same? Who owns the map? Like, I don't know in a court of law what you can own in a video game. If you can own everything, if you can own the layout of the map, the textures, the whatever, right? Or if you can only own the look, which would mean technically somebody else could make the same map layout. Let's say I made a little mobile game right now and one of my maps is identical to Pac-Man. Does that mean it's a Pac-Man copy? If the gameplay is different and the map, like everything in it looks different, but the exact map layout is a level of Pac-Man. Like, I don't feel like I would be in trouble for that. So, like, I just don't know where you would draw the line on this. I personally don't find it to be a problem. I think it's fine as long as it's within reason. If they start just full on copying the game, we have a problem, right? That's piracy. That's copyright infringement. But assuming, unless Valve are doing something behind closed doors here where they're suing them for stealing or whatever, I guess if the companies don't complain, then they think it's fine, right? Mm-hmm. And they're the ones losing money on it or whatever. So I don't know. To answer the question if being unique matters anymore,
okay,
coming up with your own stuff.
Let's forget about it from a legal standpoint for a second. Let's just assume everything's fine.
Right.
From like a fan base standpoint, do you think it matters? Like, obviously for people like us versus League of Legends, like there's an animosity. Then for Riot people, like Riot fans, they're going to like the game no matter what. Let's talk about the people that are maybe outside of those two circles. Do you think a company coming up with a completely unique idea even matters anymore? Feels like so many games are just based off of other games at this point. Like Battle Royales have had 1 million of them. Auto chess, 1 million of them now. Everyone's just copying each other over and over.
I think what matters the most to the game is it fun to play? I think that trumps absolutely everything. Whether you reinvent an old version or release a re-release of a game, right? Like Warcraft 3 Reforged was basically an updated copy of an old game, and people didn't like playing it and didn't think it was fun, so it got nuked. People fucking hated it. And then you have other games that are basically reskins of old games like Global Offensive, which is really successful. So clearly, uniqueness is not the key factor here. It is it implemented well? Is it fun? Is it interactive? Do people want to play it? Is it advertised well? I think that's the second thing, right? Because you can talk about these like 15 different battle royales, but it's not a coincidence that not the right ones, but the ones that are big for a reason. PUBG had an insane launch and they fucked up. So now they're on a seventh of the peak players they've had is what they have now on Steam. So Fortnite has been able to retain way better, and it's because they made some better decisions. But all in all, you could be like, isn't Fortnite and PUBG in many ways the same game? I mean, Fortnite has some different layers, and PUBG has some different layers, but they're both battle royales. The overall game concept is the same. So did Fortnite steal the game from PUBG? And is it unfair that they
tried to sue them
now?
Actually?
Yeah. Well, they failed, right?
They failed. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. So that's one case where they tried, right? I'm not an expert here. Let's say for the fans. Okay. I feel like I'm not answering your question very well. So as you mentioned the example of somebody who's a big Riot fan will play Riot no matter what. And if you're a big Dota fan, you're going to resent games for whatever reason.
Valve
yeah, you're going to play
Dota.
Right. You're going to play Dota. So for everybody else, if you try to put on the hat of somebody who never played Dota before, you're like, I want to play a new video game. You're going to look for something to play with your friends or something that appeals to you genre-wise and something that you're going to play for 1 or 2 hours and you're going to be like, this is fun or it's not. That's probably Dota's biggest problem in reaching a player base, is that the vast majority of people that try it for the first time get overwhelmed and are like, I'll play something that's more fun and more easy to get into. And then there's a hardcore player base that loves getting drawn to challenging games, and they're going to fucking love this game. And they're the ones you want to retain, right? I love complex games. I love being challenged in games. That's why I like Dota. That's a big part of why I love this game.
Right.
Is that it's constantly challenging and you're learning all the time. It's like an ever-going process that you're never done with. That's awesome. I love replayability in games, that I feel like I always have something to do. But we're outliers in this whole system. The vast majority of people are casual and don't want to play thousands of hours in the game. So they're going to look for us at fun. And so, you know what? You watch Valorant, you're like, this looks fun. Like, oh, I remember playing Counter-Strike, but this looks like it's got a little bit more flair to it. I'll try it. You know, there you go. If they're having fun in their first 3 hours, they might play it for 500 hours.
So
made some money.
This isn't going to make sense to a lot of the people that are watching or listening that are maybe a lot younger than me, but maybe you can relate to a degree where I feel like the industry has changed a lot. Like, let's forget about how esports has grown. Let's just talk about a video game perspective here and how much has changed. I feel like back in the day, there was the occasional, like, you'd have more unique ideas consistently in games, and graphics seemed to just matter a lot more as well. Like, each year, graphics would get better. People would be really excited. Like, I remember the first Crisis, when it came out, was a big deal, even though it wasn't a popular game. Just the fact that you can make a game look so good was very important. And now it's changed to where unique ideas don't occur very often. And when they do, there's just like 10 to 15 to 20 studios just copying it completely and trying to make their own version of it more popular. And then graphics just seem to not matter at all anymore. It's like, if anything, graphics have gotten worse in a lot of ways. Like games like Minecraft, it's the most popular game in the entire world. You know?
I think
it's interesting how things have changed so, like, flip-flopped in the perspective, at least, from back in the day.
For me, I've always thought graphics were overrated. That's just my personal perspective, that I value gameplay over everything. It's not to say that graphics don't matter at all, because they do. If Dota looked like absolute shit, it would be less enjoyable. It looks good, which is great. It could look better. I don't think that would add very much to the game. I think the thing that has probably happened with graphics and studios as well is that they might have realized that this is not necessarily a good return on investment. Like, if people's enjoyment with games and what is the most fun to them is mainly connected with gameplay, then putting the biggest amount of your budget into gameplay and making the graphics good is way better than putting a shitload of effort into making the graphics amazing and then sacrificing gameplay. On the bottom line, let's say your game costs the same, but people have less fun with it and it's buggy. It looks amazing, but it's buggy. Then you're going to lose your players. So to me, it's super healthy. I think if studios are focusing mainly on gameplay, that's great. I mean, to me, that's what's fun about games.
If you think about like the old games, though,
even
just think about like the iterations.
Can be awesome if the gameplay's fun. It's great.
Quake 1 to Quake 2, Quake 2 to Quake 3. Like, talking about huge jumps in graphics, right? Maybe it's more about becoming more efficient with like the engine and whatnot, and it's less graphically intensive. Maybe it's like you said, the investment is just not worth trying to get to that next level when the gameplay is just more important. But like the gameplay between, I'm not saying they weren't different, but the leaps weren't there at all, right? In terms of gameplay, like Quake 3 was, or Quake 4 specifically, actually, is a great example. That was not a popular game, and the graphics were much better. So you could see the perspective and the priorities have changed a lot from both consumer and devs.
In addition, a second benefit you have by not going too hard on graphics is that more people can run your game. So if you have insane minimum requirements for your game, you're already cutting out a big percentage of your market because they can't afford to run your game. And there's a good chance that if it's extremely intensive and insane graphics, that you've probably put a lot of funding into that. So your game will be more expensive. That means you also lose customers that feel like this video game costs too much. So I'm guessing that's what has happened over the last 5 years, that these big studios have tried these different models and they've just realized this is what works. And there's so many success examples that you can look to. Like, can you mention a game right now off the top of your head in the last 5 years that was massively successful strictly because of its graphics? There's not a single game for me that comes to mind.
No.
Where people were like, holy shit, this is the most beautiful game ever. I'm playing it because it looks
I wouldn't
beautiful.
say it's popular, but the first thing that comes to mind is the new Battlefield, I guess, because of RTX, which ended up running like absolute garbage. Like you get 30 FPS at the cost of it looking really good. But I wouldn't call Battlefield a super popular game these days. I think it's gone super downhill, considering they come out with a new freaking game every 2 years for whatever reason. That's probably the closest I can think. But yeah, it just doesn't matter as much anymore.
I don't know. I mean, it's clearly a selling point. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It does. The best or the big titles that have a big budget will obviously care about graphics. That's why, especially the releases that go on both PlayStation and PC, some of the big releases do care a lot about their graphics. To me, it's never the carrying element. It's always a compliment. It's like if you have a 9 out of 10 gameplay experience, the 10 out of 10 can be that last, the eye candy is what makes it brilliant. But you can't make a beautiful game with shitty gameplay. It will never be good. It doesn't matter how good it looks because it's just not fun. Then you could watch a movie instead. Right? Like then you could watch a movie that looks amazing.
Unless you're you and you don't watch movies. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then you just play something else that isn't a movie.
I'm going to talk to Gabe and make sure that Dota goes down for a few hours during a certain day to make sure you can watch what you need to watch. Yeah. True. All right, let's get to our Patreon mailbag, Cinderman. We have 2 different questions that are kind of interlinked from our Discord. Would you like to take it?
Sure. I'll read them out one at a time, and then we'll answer them kind of together because I think it's a good combination to answer. So the first question was from Teddy, saying, question. Do you find that there are multiple pauses every game that last way too long? I swear people disconnect to do other stuff just because the pausing is so lenient. If it was more strict, like CS, maybe we would see less of it. What do you think? And then the second question from FH Andre is, thanks for the idea. Would you think tactical pauses would be a good idea for the game? For example, a 2-minute pause during idle time every 20 minutes to decide future builds, decide who's going to carry each neutral item, etc. So I'm going to try to give my perspective on these combined. I feel most strongly about the second question, but overall, the first one, if you made pausing a little bit more strict, it's to me, it's a risk-reward kind of thing. If you make pausing more strict, you punish people more if they have unstable connections and just have bad luck. One of the things I like about Dota is that your ISP can fuck you over for 5 minutes and you still don't lose the game. In League of Legends, if you disconnect, there's no pausing. At least there wasn't years ago. I don't know if they've changed anything about that. But
okay, that could be horribly outdated, but sure.
It could be. It was this way for years, though. So I'm positive about that. There was no pausing. So if people disconnected, you were just playing without that player, which I think that's like the extreme other end of the scale, which I think is terrible. Pausing should be in the game because shit happens. Someone's at the door or your connection goes down, whatever it is.
Have you had issues though with pauses? I feel like based on my playing experience, it hasn't really been that big of an issue.
It varies. Like some days I feel like every game has 2 pauses. The thing that would be like, you can always give people the benefit of the doubt, but I know in the back of my mind that half the time the game is paused in the start is because someone's out have a fucking cigarette, and that's do I feel like we should be paused for that? No. I feel like if you need a cigarette, you go smoke and then you queue after. That's my opinion. But, whatever.
Wow, that's a novel idea you got there, Cinderin.
Yeah, it's actually unbelievable. Don't waste other people's time with that. Or pick your hero first and then go smoke. If you really need to have a smoke, then you got to have your smoke. But whatever. I think a lot of pauses are smoking related. That's like a quick thing you need to do. Or go to the bathroom. Whatever it is. And that's fine. If the pauses should be more strict, I haven't had too many problems, if I can be honest, but I get that it can be frustrating, especially if you hit a streak of games where it feels like people are pausing all the time and you're like powerless to stop it. Like you can resume every once in a while, but of course this team is going to pause again. So you go into this like cycle of 3 minutes of just pausing, right? I don't know. Yeah. I'm not too fussed. If they made it a bit stricter, I wouldn't mind. But I don't think it's necessary. Now, the other question I feel way more strongly about, and I have a very good argument about this, I think. So this has been suggested in the past that we put tactical pauses into Dota, and I think the game that was mainly referenced for it was actually Counter-Strike. In CSGO, you can call tactical timeouts in competitive CSGO and discuss it. And there's a really clear reason why that works well in CS and not in Dota, in my opinion. CS is round-based, and that means there's a natural pause in the game every round. So the flow of the game is always going to be interrupted either way. And therefore, it's very natural to say, okay, this has just happened. We're resetting. If you want to compare it to, let's say, physical sports, let's compare it to handball. When a goal has been scored and you call a timeout, it's kind of like the play is reset when a goal gets scored. The defending team has the ball and now they need to make a move, right? So if you call a timeout there, it's kind of the same in NFL, right? Where you can also, there's a little bit of a borderline with like icing the kicker and shit, but for the most part, calling timeouts in American football, it's also a turn-based game. It has interruptions in play. Dota doesn't. Dota is start to finish is a fluent experience that doesn't have downtime. So a big part of the game and a big part of what makes the game unique and interesting is that it's a constant, it's like a story being told where everything is developing all the time. And every time you interrupt it, it breaks the story for the players and for the fans. I think fans would hate it personally. Yeah. Like they just want to watch the fucking game. And in CSGO, people put up with it way more because it's easier to spin a narrative. Okay, we're going to change the strategy. There's a little bit of a break while they're buying their weapons anyway.
Well, there's also some major
right?
differences where Counter-Strike is much more momentum-based. So hyping up your team makes a bigger difference, I would argue. Much bigger difference in a game that's FPS-related, more Twitch-related. And like you said, there's just less breaks. And like Dota is a long enough game as it is. Holy shit. Counter-Strike, some of the games can go long. It doesn't feel long, you know, because there's constant action. It's round-based. It just resets and you go again. Where Dota, you can have 20 minutes. Like we had a game today where almost nothing happened for 20 minutes during the game. Like I might as well not even been commentating, for God's sake. That's just the nature of the game. So I think, yeah, tactical pause. Plus, you could, if you abuse them, it becomes way worse than
this is the
other
final
scenarios.
And I think this is honestly the strongest argument out of all of them, because you could be like, the game is fluent and whatnot, but if you give teams the power to pause, it can be extremely manipulated. Like, let's say you're smoking and your smoke breaks outside the Roche pit and you instantly pause. Now you can deduct where the enemy team is. You can plan your course of attack and they don't know you're there because you were smoked. So now you have a huge advantage that in real time you can't convert because things happen too fast. It makes the game extremely superficial.
I mean,
it doesn't
Would there even be rules for like pausing in the middle of a fight?
Well,
like,
yeah, exactly. How do you enforce it? Like, what's the rule? You can't pause when you're within 1,000 range of a hero. Who the fuck knows if they're within 1,000 range of a hero?
Imagine
right?
if it was allowed and you just in the middle of a fight, all right, tactical pause. Yeah. I mean, we've seen it before by accident, you know.
It has happened because somebody disconnected, and it impacts the outcome of a fight, and it sucks. 100%. And there's just this kind of, this fairness codex among the pro scene that if somebody disconnects, it fucking sucks. It could happen to you next time. We're going to accept it and move on, and we'll play that fight with a player disconnected. There's a pause when everybody gets to analyze the situation, and inevitably one team will be favored more than the other by this happening. Maybe the fight would have been a 4-0 if there was no pause, and maybe now it's a 2-2 because they can plan exactly who they're going to target. And it fucking sucks, right? It broke the real play of the game. It made it fake, kind of, and you just have to deal with it. The alternative, however, is even worse, that somebody disconnects and you're just like, oh, well, you guys are fucked. Too bad, you know?
Yeah.
You lost. That's worse. So it's like the lesser evil. But yeah, that's why pauses don't work in Dota. If you want to implement it, the only way I can imagine tactical pausing in Dota is that you're allowed to pause at the start of the game when the heroes are in base. And you're like, teams have 2 minutes to talk about how they want to lane, how you want to place your heroes, how you want to buy your items, and then you go. Dota kind of already has that built in, though, because when you pick in captain's mode, there's time in the beginning of the game before you pick your heroes. And then after you pick your heroes, there's a loading screen. And then there's 1.5 minutes until the horn. So, like, you know.
But even during the game, if you die, you're dead for, like, let's say a minute because it's mid to late game. You still have time to think and strategize. It's not like you're just constantly doing shit.
Usually other players are playing in the game. It's unless you're fully team wiped, right? Unless you're fully team wiped, somebody's attention is divided. Right?
Well, yeah, if you're talking about like a team meeting, sure. I'm talking about like from an individual standpoint. Like if your coach, or not coach, your leader, your in-game leader dies, he can, assess things as he's stuck in Fountain.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, I don't think it's good either. But yeah, thank you for the questions in this case, Patreon supporters. And I believe we have come to the end of the episode, Cinderman.
Yeah.
I believe we're releasing this at the same time as always. I mean, we'll see. Things can always change. Don't quote me on that. But have you seen In Bruges, Cinderin?
No.
Thank you so much. 1 year officially now, by the way. Last week doesn't count.
You didn't ask me the first week.
Wait, what week did I? All right, now I need to investigate. We're gonna have the 1 year in Bruges anniversary episode, whenever that is. We'll figure that out post episode. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Until next time, Suns fan Cinderin signing out. Goodbye. We say things that don't mean anything, but thanks for listening. Yeah.